In normal times, the grain mandi of Samrala is abuzz with a hum of agrarian commerce. These days, however, it lies virtually vacant, with only a handful of farmers coming to sell their produce. Again, I have three options. Again, my direction is very clearly saying pick out the option that is A, B or C, which when used to start the sentence combines both the above sentences into one. Okay, let's go. What do you think? Now try this one. Apply the same logic that we've done for the previous two questions and see if you are able to answer these. Just make sure it is meaningful. It's retaining the essence of these two sentences. Just ensure that is in place. So let's break down this sentence, this question a little more, okay? So they're saying in normal times the grain mandi of Samrala. So we're talking about a particular city, right? A place, Samrala, right? So keep that in mind. So you understand the context, right? Sentence 1 is saying normally this place is abuzz with a hum of agrarian commerce, but nowadays, right? There's a but. It's vacant. Why? Because only a handful of farmers are coming to sell their produce. So if I start the sentence with as only a handful of farmers are coming to sell their, I want you to give me the context actually. Let me not give you the answer. So everybody's given me different options. Let's look at it. I have to retain the essence of the two sentences. Hai na? So if I say as only a handful of farmers are coming to sell their produce these days, it lies virtually vacant. But in normal times, the grain mandi of Samrala is abuzz with a hum of agrarian commerce. Can't I say that? Why can't I say that? Let's put this sentence here, right? If I say, as only a handful of farmers are coming to sell their produce, where? At the grain mandi, right? I can either have this here or I don't need to, but I'm combining both these sentences, right? As only a handful of farmers are coming to sell their produce, I can either include this here or leave it as it is, are coming to sell their produce. What is happening? Well, these days, right? They're coming to sell their produce these days. Let me put it here. Produce these days. Because I've mentioned it here at the grain mandi of Samrala, these days, it lies vacant, right? Or if I'm not putting at the grain mandi of Samrala here, I can say, as only a handful of farmers are coming to sell their produce these days, the mandi lies vacant, right? I can include the mandi here also. Instead of it, I can say the grain mandi of Samrala or the mandi lies vacant. But what is the scene in the normal times? But in normal times, it is abuzz. Now I can put the pronoun because I've already mentioned the grain mandi of Samrala. The subject has already been mentioned here, or I mention it here, right? So I can say, but in normal times, it remains or it is abuzz with the hum of agrarian commerce. So I can absolutely start the sentence with option A, right? Because the meaning is retained. I have both the sentences meaning, correct? Let's look at this again. As only a handful of farmers. The reason is why it is vacant is because, so reason is brought out by the conjunction as. As only a handful of farmers are coming to sell their produce these days, the mandi lies vacant, but in normal times, it is abuzz with the hum of agrarian commerce. Both the sentences are, meaning is retained. Whatever the sentences are trying to convey is there in the thing. So option A seems absolutely fine. What about option B? The grain mandi of Samrala lies vacant. When? These days. Why? Because only a handful of farmers are coming to sell their produce. But same thing. In normal times, the grain mandi of Samrala is abuzz with a, so I can use option B also. Not an issue. It is correct. So the same sentence that Preet has put in will apply. The grain mandi of Samrala lies vacant these days or virtually vacant these days. Why? Because only a handful of farmers are coming to sell their produce. Again, I use but like how I've used it in sentence A. But in normal times, it is abuzz with a hum of agrarian commerce. So B also will fit. A and B. What about C? Only the grain mandi. Now this doesn't make sense, right? What do you mean by only the grain mandi? What are you trying to say? We are talking about the grain mandi of a particular place which is Samrala. So when I say only the grain mandi, it defeats the whole purpose of both the sentence meaning, right? because the sentences are conveying, boss, what is happening now and what is the normal situation. So I cannot start the sentence with only the grain mandi, because there is no reference to anything specific to the grain mandi. It just says, it talks about what is the situation in normal times and what is the situation these days, and the reasons are given. So C is incorrect, which means anything that has C and does not have both A and B together is incorrect, which is all of the options except A. We cannot connect C because of the word only the grain mandi, which doesn't make sense at all, because both the contexts are talking about what's happening in this place. Normal times it is abuzz, current days it is vacant. Yes, why not? As Faisal is going on leave next week, can you please substitute for him John? I just gave you a context with starting with as. As is just a conjunction, right? It gives me the expressing the meaning of reason, right? So I just gave you a context. As Faisal is going on leave next month, John, would you substitute for him? Right? So guys, what I see here is either you're getting confused with the direction of the question, which Kirtika and a lot of other people clarified, which I think is a good thing, right? So let's recap what we've done for this question type. 1, the first confusion that all of you had is, hey, can we add words in between as long as we are using the options to start the sentence? Yes, you can, to answer that question. Confusion number 2. What was confusion number 2? There was only one confusion, right? Can we use other words in between to connect the two sentences? Yes, you can. As long as you're sticking to the direction. The direction only says from the given options, use the given options to start the sentence. And second thing is, you just need to ensure that the meaning is retained, right? The two sentences are conveying or expressing some meaning that has to be retained when you're connecting the two sentences, right? So if you are clear with this, you ideally should not have any confusion. So let's move on to our next question type. Don't worry, I didn't want to jam pack too many questions on the same type because it's good for us to have variety of questions, but we will look at this in the next session as well. Let's move on to our next one, which is synonym antonym questions, right? In SSC exams and all, if you see, they will say pick the option that is closest in meaning to the given word, or pick the option that is opposite in meaning to the given word. But slightly complicated version of the same thing will be, but you never know, because every exam is kind of upgrading themselves, right? Last year we had a lot of new questions introduced, so you need to be prepared. What if they ask this question? At least you'll know, okay, I have an idea. So in this variation, the question that we're going to see now is, options are given. It can either be a combination of synonyms or it can either be a combination of antonyms, which means the option can either be a synonym to the given word or it can be an antonym to the given word. Slightly difficult in terms of, it's only a little more time consuming if you ask me, right? We have to be very careful to not pick the wrong option. Let's look at the question type. Phrase connectors. I'm guessing this was part of the AIM. So let's read the direction. Select the phrase connector from the given 3 options, which can be used to form a single sentence from the 2 sentences given below, implying the same meaning expressed in the statement sentences. Perfect. So we understand this. We know this question type. We're familiar with this. Let's look at what those 2 sentences are first. Sentence 1. With the advent of goods and services tax, the center is now planning to integrate the direct and indirect taxation system for all indirect taxpayers. This can be done by linking the GST number with the PAN issued by the Income Tax Department. So let's look at all these contexts, okay? So option A says the PAN issued. It's right here. Then it says the direct and indirect, which is right here. Then it says the center with the center is only here. Now we have to pick out the option which when used to start a sentence. Very clearly the direction is there. I can't use it in between. I have to use these options to start the sentence. Combines both the sentence into one logically and meaningfully, right? So if I start with the PAN issued by the income tax department, I'm stuck there itself, right? I don't know how to connect the remaining part. How will I connect this one and the previous sentence? The PAN issued by the income tax department is what? I just cannot form a logical connect. What about B? The direct and indirect taxation system for all indirect taxpayers. The taxpayers, can I say again, how will I connect? I can say the direct and indirect taxation system for all indirect taxpayers can now be integrated. Can now be integrated with the advent of goods and service tax. And the center is okay, let me just write that sentence, okay, just for argument's sake. I'm just going to write it here. Please bear with me. So I'm going to use option B, okay. I'll use it here. So the direct and indirect, let's take the taxation system for all indirect taxpayers can now be, I'm just forming my own sentence, okay, integrated with what? The advent of goods and service tax. I'm just going to put GST, okay. Okay, after this I'm stuck. Can now be integrated with the advent of GST, and the center is planning to do this, or planning this by linking the GST number with the PAN issued by the income tax department. Does this make sense? Let's read. The direct and indirect taxation system for all indirect taxpayers can now be integrated with the advent of GST. And the center is planning this. How is it planning to do? By linking the GST number. It seems like it's making sense, but my only concern is this part. The direct and indirect taxation system for all indirect taxpayers can now be integrated. Now this part slightly changes the meaning that the context is trying to explain, right? When I say can now be integrated, I'm saying, hey, it can be done, but we don't know that yet, because it says very clearly the center is now planning. So the meaning slightly changes. We can't do that, right? Because it says very clearly implying the same meaning and expressed in the statement sentences. So when I say can now be integrated, I'm for sure saying, boss, this can be possible, this can be done. But the context meaning is saying it's now planning to do this. It's in planning stage, right? And this is how it's planning to do it. We don't know it yet. So since the meaning is slightly changing, though I am somehow trying to make logical sense, yes, that's why I cannot go with option B. What about C? The center, so I take only the center, because of that planning, I cannot use this option B, though I have somehow created a sentence. See, the center with the advent of goods and service tax. So since all I'm doing is I'm just putting center here, right? Before the center with the advent of goods and service tax is same thing, is now planning to integrate the direct and indirect taxation system for all indirect taxpayers. And either I can say, and this can be done by linking, or I can just say taxpayers by, cut out this whole thing, by linking the GST number with the PAN issued by the income tax department. And this makes sense, and it is also retaining the meaning. So obviously only option C, which is there, which is that option C. That's it. Khatam. Ho gaya. Yeah? Everybody's following? I didn't see the comment section. So everybody's anyway said option C. Okay, good. You guys are good. Now, since we are using this session to kind of learn more than just try and give the answer out, because those of you who've given the answer, again, I'm assuming that you've taken the test and you know the answer, and that's why you're able to give the answer, right? But I want you to pay attention to the approach that we're taking. That's more important, because obviously you may not get the same question in your exam, right? It'll be a different question. The Reserve Bank of India has finalized norms for peer-to-peer lending platform. Final guidelines are expected to be released in 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah. The only reason, Sugeta, it is difficult is also because of the fact that we're not strong in our sentence construction itself, right? We don't explore other options. While taking time to practice also, we have a challenge generally with constructing sentences. And that's why spot the error is the most challenging question type for us. You following? Let's look at this one. If I just add, option A says the norms for peer-to-peer lending platform, I can say who's finalized that? RBI has finalized it. So I can say the norms for peer-to-peer lending platform has been finalized by the Reserve Bank of India. And then I can just add and, right? And the final guidelines are expected to be released in 2 to 3 weeks. Makes sense. Option A, definitely. No doubt. What about option B? Peer-to-peer platform. If I start with that, the peer-to-peer platform, already lending is missing. So I don't even have to look at that option because that's a critical content word, right? It has to be there. So since that's missing, I can just safely eliminate option B. And they've taken expected, this word, and put it as option C. The expected what? I cannot link that to anything, right? Because here it's used as a verb and here it's used as an adjective, which means I need a noun. What can I link expected to? It just doesn't make sense. So the only option which when used to start a sentence, and if I combine these two sentences into one, that will make sense is option A. So the norms for peer-to-peer lending platform, like somebody said, has been finalized by RBI, Reserve Bank of India, and these final guidelines, right? And the final guidelines, just add a connector and the final guidelines, blah, 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 they are expected to be, that's it. Ta-da! Only A. Super A. Relatively easier compared to the previous question. We'll do one more just for the hang of it, just for people who are, usually have a challenge with phrase connectors.